All right, so for our next class at the John David Ebert School for the Study of Culture, Cosmology, and the Arts, we will be understanding astrology. And so what we'll do is we'll go through, we're going to use as the textbook Horoscope Symbols by Rob Hand, but that'll just be a kind of rough outline because we'll be going over a bunch of other things than I've just titled these after his chapters. Points in the chart, the angular relationships, zodiacal position, the signs, then combinations of stellar influences, and for that we'll have recourse to Reinhold Ebertine, and then the signs, core meanings, mundane position, which has to do with the houses, and then conclusion and summary. But we'll discuss a lot of things, including the great cycle that takes place every 25,920 years. We'll go through that whole problem with the precession of the equinoxes and the myths that pertain to that. Cost is $250 if you want to attend live. If you only want a subscription to the videos of the class discussions and the lectures, that's $150. If you're interested, hit me up at johndavidebert@gmail.com. I would rather have you come through me directly than go through Teachable. And then there are other courses available, such as the one we're doing now in the Greek myths, and then Understanding Mason and Dixon. We're just about finished with that. We're on the last chapter there. And then we've already finished all of Finnegan's Wake. So that's available. That's in two halves. And the prices actually for the classes that are finished will be $150. I just haven't updated them on here. So it's $150 for the ones that are finished. And the live one, we're about class 4, I think, on the Western Canon, is $250. And okay, so I also do astrology readings. Keep that in mind. There again, it's johndavidebert@gmail.com. And we will also look at some of my notes. I have notes that I've written making my own sort of comparisons and emendations to the traditional system. For example, I've done the correspondence here with the chakras. We've got the serpent in the cave is Pluto. It corresponds to Pluto because cave, that's the underworld. And the Muladhara actually corresponds, in my view, to Saturn. Svadhisthana to Venus, the sex chakra. Manipura at the level of the belly is Mars. Then there's actually an 8th chakra that you don't hear much talk about, but it's Hrit, and it corresponds to the moon. It's called the wish-fulfilling tree, and it has to do with growth, which is crescere in Italian, crescent. I've got the sun for the Anahita, and Mercury for the Vishuddha, and Neptune for Agya, and Jupiter for Sahasrara, and so forth. And then I've got all kinds of things that we can discuss, including what fascinates me too is to compare the ancient mythologies and their versions of the planets. For example, when you look at Babylonian astrology, where you have Marduk for Jupiter, and you've got Utu. Utu is Sumerian, Shamash is Babylonian for the sun, Nanisine for the moon, and Nisaba for Mercury, because originally it was a goddess, the goddess of writing. But then the Babylonians push her out and bring in Nabu. Inanna, the goddess of love, is transformed into Ishtar by the Babylonians, the goddess of love and war. And Ninib for the corresponding to Mars for the Sumerians, which becomes Nergal for the Babylonians, and he's the Pluto figure too. He's the lord of the underworld. But the archetypes are basically the same, and that's the thing about the planets as opposed to the constellations, which are very, very different. If you look at the constellations for Ursa Major, we say that it's a bear, but the Sumerians had it as a wagon. The Navajo have it as a man whirling around the pole star. So which archetype is it? And that's the problem with the constellations, is that they seem to have different archetypes cross-culturally, whereas the planets do not. If we come down here and we look at the Indian planets, the Hindu Indian planets, their god of war is Skandakartikaya, and he corresponds to Mars. Venus is male, Shukra. It's male, but it's associated still with women, love, sex, wealth, and beauty. Same archetype as in the West. Mercury is Buddha, the intelligent one. The moon is Soma, which has to do with male astral passions and desires, jealousy, ecstasy, arrogance. The sun is Surya. Brihaspati corresponds to Jupiter. He protects against the wicked, so he's a benevolent planet in India as well as in the West. And then Saturn, Shani, is pictured as a black man on a raven and corresponds to old age and discipline. Same exact archetypes as in the Mesopotamian world and in the Indian world and also in Chinese astrology. Zhurong is the god of fire, the antagonist of Gangang, the water god. That corresponds to Mars. Taibai Jinxing is Venus, which is sometimes female, sometimes male, depending on the representation. A man associated with a sex scandal. Here again, it's also associated with love and sex and so forth. Mercury is Haidi. The symbol is a tortoise shell, which the Chinese use for riding upon. The moon is the moon goddess Chang'e. And then the sun is Dai Yang and is masculine. Jupiter is Fu Xing. And look at this, it's the god of good fortune and wealth. Isn't that interesting? Same archetype as in the West. Saturn is Wufang Shangdi or Huangdi, the maker of matter. Element is earth. It is the heaviest. So the archetypes for the planets cross-culturally are exactly the same. So there is something in the planets that resonates at a certain frequency that people who have good spiritual intuition can pick up on. And then so we'll go through a whole bunch of stuff. There's a lot more here. So that'll be the class, and it starts on November 2nd, which is Saturday, November 2nd at noon MST, and it'll continue until December 28th. And it will skip over Thanksgiving week, but I think it's safe to land 3 days after Christmas for the last class there on the 28th. That should be fine. Everyone should be settled by then. Okay, that's it. Hit me up at johndavidebert@gmail.com if you're interested.